elegant listeners, and welcome to Go, my favorite sports team. And it's your favorite sports podcast. I'm your host, Markiplier. Hope you're having a lovely day. I'm joined by my eternal, perpetual co-host and probably main host, Tyler.
That's me, your master of balls and holes and knowledgeable about sports guy.
That's him. If you didn't know that, he's there. And if this is your first time in the podcast, that's just what he calls himself.
Yep.
No one calls him that.
Even though Mark was the one who created that title for me.
I don't think that's true. There's no evidence of that.
There's no video evidence, but there's audio evidence.
I don't think there's any evidence either way. Anyway, today we're going to talk about something. If you've read the title of this episode, yes, we are talking about the infamous 1904 Olympics in St. Louis.
Yes.
But before we do that, we're going to talk about a little bit of news in today's Olympics that are occurring today, because this was 120 years ago as of these Olympics. And I think that's fortuitous, being that it's the year of 2024.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest news that I have right now is in an Olympic tune-up, Ukraine's top high jumper beats the 37-year world record.
Damn.
It's been standing for 37 years. I do not know how to pronounce this name, so it's going to be butchered, but it's Yaroslava Mashika.
Wow, that was about the most butchered name I've ever heard in my life.
So she erased a mark that stood for 37 years at a Diamond League meet in Paris. She jumped 2.1 meters in one of the last big tune-ups leading to the Olympics. The previous record was 2.09 meters.
So that's actually quite a bit more.
Yeah, so that's 10 centimeters more than the previous record.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's significant. Like, it's not like you beat it by like a centimeter or a millimeter. Like, if you really want microscopic to millimeters, she beat it by a significant amount.
Well, congratulations to her. Hopefully she does it in the Olympics as well.
Yeah, and dominates. The previous record was set by Bulgaria's Stefka Kostadinova.
You're doing great, man. You're doing great. Proud of you.
Massive history being broken by a Ukraine athlete.
Congratulations. Best of luck in the Olympics that are occurring right now immediately.
Yes, Paris Olympics. Well, they're coming up. They're going to start soon.
Is the air conditioner working?
Do you want to turn? I can turn up the AC.
It's hot.
I feel fine, so I'll lower the temperature. I'll turn the AC on higher.
Well, anyway, is there any other news?
I mean, you specified Olympic news. I kind of talked about a good amount of the Olympic news already, but I can jump into other news, like the fact that Pirates rookie Paul Skeens only started 10 times and is now about to enter the All-Star conversation, which is unheard of. He's only been starting and playing baseball now for 3 months, as opposed to the entire season of Major League Baseball, and he's considered one of the best pitchers in baseball right now.
Okay, well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So he's struck out the best batter in baseball in Shohei Ohtani. Oh my God!
Oh man, you and names today.
My names. I can't. I'm worried if I even try and say your name that I'm going to mispronounce it now. Shohei Ohtani.
Mm-hmm.
He struck him out when they faced off earlier this season.
Well, that's a damn shame to them. But you got Caitlin Clark news.
The Caitlin Clark news was last week.
Oh damn! All right, fine.
It was a triple double. Probably still dominating the WNBA.
It's fine. Whatever.
I've got John Cena news.
Oh,
John Cena officially announces
not
his
an athlete, not part of a real sport. That's according to Tyler. That's not me saying that. That's Tyler. That's Tyler saying that. I'm trying to throw that back in his face. Don't attack me.
It's sports ancillary news. But John Cena announces his retirement from professional wrestling after the 2025 season. So he will be retired.
I thought he was already retired for a good bit now.
He like did it part-time. Now he's officially retiring, which I also don't think that means much, because I feel like he's still going to be like, but come back to be a celebrity appearance. But I think he's officially retiring from doing anything in the ring.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So whatever contract he probably had, like partial contract to do movies and whatnot. How old is he?
He's getting up
47?
there. Yeah.
Well, good for him. John Felix Anthony Cena is an American actor, rapper, and professional wrestler. Wrestler is after rapper.
Yeah, that's actually how he became popular as a wrestler, is he freestyled and then people fell in love with him because he was on the chopping block to be no longer in the WWE's like criteria of top wrestlers. He was falling off, and then he freestyled, and that's when people were like, oh shit, and then they started loving him, which then made him become more prevalent. If you want to get into Olympic news, World Swimming Federation confirms U.S. federal investigation into Chinese swimmers' doping tests.
Uh-oh.
Chinese swimmers might be doping and getting an unfair advantage in competing in swimming.
I would not be surprised. And that's not just saying like Chinese. I'm saying like I wouldn't be surprised if any athlete was doping. It would
especially
not come as a shock.
Level.
Yeah, in no country would that be a surprise. If you told me, "Oh, Yugoslavia is testing for doping," I'm like, I bet. France doping? Oui, you know, absolutely, 100%.
It's like in school, the people who would cheat in school on tests and stuff were always the more exceptional students, as opposed to the ones that were failing.
Is that true?
Yeah, because they were always trying to.
Well, they wouldn't be failing if they were cheating.
The ones that would cheat would be the people that were really trying to get the highest scores and stuff. Statistically speaking, are the more likely ones to actually be cheating on tests than the people who are not doing so hot. Like C students cheat way less than people that are like B students. I think it probably runs the same with athletes. Those that are at the pinnacle top to try and be the top of the top will be more likely to cheat than the people that are just average.
Well, I did not know that. For those out there who are thinking of cheating, don't worry if you're not at the top level. But if you're at the top level, better hurry up. Everybody else is cheating. You got to cheat too to keep up.
That's why the drug games are going to become a thing.
I mean, if you think about it, to get a little off topic before we talk about the real topic, if you think about it, we are not too far away from genetically modifying humans, because I think there was something that was saying, like, there was a research convention about CRISPR, or one of those associated new developments in genealogy or whatever it is. And it was a convention where everyone had agreed, like, we're not going to edit humans. We all agree. And then some guy came in and was like, yeah, I've been doing it for years.
Oh my God.
3 years ago, I started, here's all my data, here's all my paperwork. And everyone goes like, and he might have even like got barred from something and went to jail. I don't know, paid a fine. But everyone after, because he released all his data, everyone else was like, you sick pervert. Let me just read that. Oh my God, you did. That's a good idea. It's really is one of the things where when the cat's out of the bag, there's really nothing you can do about it.
Right.
And when you have people with a lot of money, and there's selfish reasons at first. First thing that's going to happen is people are going to try to do whatever they can to stop aging, right? Of course, because you got millionaires and billionaires right now doing anything, drinking their own children's blood to be able to stay.
Are they drinking it or infusing it? Because that was the biggest thing.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference is one goes through your
I know
digestion.
what the difference is. I'm just saying it. Butt chugging it would be the ideal way.
Faster absorption. Do you think that if you going way off a tangent?
Off of my tangent to this
D&D.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you think if health potions existed, right? So D&D world, right?
Wait. Bob and Wade were talking about this.
If you butt chug the potion, would it just be faster acting, or would it be more effective?
Is Wade's ideas just like the random like jokes that happen in your D&D sessions or wherever you play online?
He personally messaged me when he first thought of it a long time ago. So
man,
that was like a few weeks.
That's all happened. That's his podcast topics. Is just like, I had a random idea. Anyway, we did an extensive conversation about it. It just depends on the type of potion, whether it needs to be digested to be effective. Because some medications do need to be digested to be effective. You cannot just inject them or snort them.
But alcohol can be done that way. Don't do it. It's insanely dangerous.
Yeah, alcohol just needs to get into the bloodstream.
Right.
And it's not really broken down in the stomach. And it's readily absorbed through membranes. If you hold alcohol in your mouth for a long period of time, it will absorb into your blood faster than you would if you actually swallowed it. More directly. I'm not saying faster. It would take a long time for all of it to get through, honestly.
And it's also because there's only so much that's designed to be absorbed through the mouth.
Yeah.
Whereas the intestinal tract is the primary absorption area for nutrients in general. Yeah.
It would also burn a lot because it'd be like taking a shot of Listerine or something like that. Anyway, back to my off topic. We're not too far off from the ability to do this. And when it starts, what's going to happen to athletes down the road when you have babies that were genetically modified to become faster, stronger, taller, denser bones, wider wingspan? Their parents, for whatever reason, had a designer baby, and that baby grows up, and they're taller, faster, stronger, whatever. Maybe not smarter. I don't know if that's something you can modify.
There's still a mentality that has to be there. That's the biggest thing.
But what happens when you get these athletes that have all the benefits of, say, like the strongest steroids you could ever have,
There's going to be a bunch of Michael Phelps, because I don't know if I've told you this about Michael Phelps. He's literally the epitome of what a swimmer's body should be. He has partially webbed feet. His torso is insanely long and his legs are short, which allows for better kicking and everything for butterfly. Yeah. And then he has an insanely large wingspan for being able to scoop and go for butterfly. Like, he has the ideal like proportions of a swimmer, which is why when people like talk about Michael Phelps and the reason he was so dominant, not just that part, obviously he had the motivation, and he had the mental edge of like, he has that killer's mentality of, I'm going to win, I'm going to compete, I'm going to be the best of the best. But his body type is built so perfectly fine-tuned for swimming in every like weird small aspect that you could imagine, that it's almost like maybe he was a designer baby.
All right, listen. For a human, right?
Yes.
I could imagine some shark hybrid that would be
give him some
better
gills.
Designed. Look, I'm not saying he's not good at swimming, but he ain't got no fins. He ain't got gills.
He's as close as you get with fins because of the web feet.
Yeah, those little piddly things, webs. Yeah. I'm talking like full on, every finger bridge. This baby's gonna be a freak.
It's like your perfect athlete, the one that could just like a jet engine with airflow.
Exactly. But what happens when the reality hits, where we're only like 10, 20 years away from it being to the point where you could, and then you have another 10, 20 years till those athletes grow up, those designer athletes, then how's that going to change everything?
It will change everything in sports, because that brings into the question again that we talked about early on, is the integrity of sport, where cheating or any way that alters the outcome.
But is it cheating for the child? They didn't have a choice.
Right, but would it still be considered like the same way that PEDs would be cheating? It would still be along the same kind of lines of those, whether it was their decision or not. It's like, if you're an athlete and somebody you don't know that they're doing this, but your like athletic trainer's like, oh yeah, you need these injections all the time, and they've been hitting you with anabolic steroids all the time, but you didn't know, you're still cheating.
But what if everything's natural?
Well, I mean, a designer baby isn't really considered. Is that considered natural?
How would you prove it?
That's true.
Yeah, how would anybody prove it? You see this like epitome of athletic prowess. How would you prove it?
I mean, at that point, then it becomes completely dominated by the rich, because they're the ones that can afford to make the designer babies.
Get rich
or die trying. That's a movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of absolute chads of athletic prowess, let's talk about the 1904 St. Louis Olympics, a historic Olympics for various reasons, not only because boxing was first introduced into the Olympics in 1904 in St. Louis. It was introduced as an Olympic sport right then and there. And back then, the popular way of doing boxing was bare knuckle.
Oh, right.
Yeah, there were obviously padded boxing rings, and it was like a popular sport to go witness and stuff like that, but there still were tons of bare knuckle bouts that were occurring. And bare knuckle bouts, contrary to what people think, it's harder to knock someone out with your bare knuckles than it is with a boxing glove, for the reasons that, number one, your hand hurts. The skull is much stronger than the finger bones. I don't know if people knew that.
Yeah.
In fact, boxers break their fingers all the time.
It's literally the same thing with like American football. When they added the gloves, people were swinging harder than they were with bare knuckles because they were, worried about their injuries. When you put pads on somebody, that's why you have people flying at 1,000,000 miles per hour taking hits, because the pads make you feel more invincible and they do protect you. But that means, I can deliver more force.
And turns out those leather gloves, especially back in the day, were real good at whomping people.
Yeah.
They'd make heads bounce. Anyway, that was not the problem with the 1904 Olympics.
Quick 1904 Olympics fact that I know off the top of my head. Did you know that the 1904 Olympics were actually supposed to take place somewhere else? They weren't set to be in St. Louis, but because they were scheduled at the same time as the World Fair was, they moved them to coincide in the same location as the World Fair in St. Louis. I believe Chicago was the city that was originally set to host.
Yeah, which seems very strange because they're like, oh shit, the World Fair is going on at the same time. Let's do both.
Well, I
Let's
think they were
move it
worried
there.
about attendance at the Olympics because they're like, everyone's going to be at the World Fair. They're not going to come watch sports at the Olympics.
Uh-huh.
Combine them.
Yeah, exactly. You got the nerds and then the sport nerds. It was the earliest manifestation of this podcast. Bring the sport knower and the not knower. And it was a disaster, just like this podcast.
Oh my God.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, 1904, St. Louis,
Yes.
the city of dreams.
Is that what it's called?
The city of Louis.
Missouri.
St. Louis, Missouri.
The biggest city in Missouri.
It's got an arch.
That's where Budweiser was created.
All I remember
think.
is that last time we drove across the country, we drove through St. Louis, and my God, were we glad to be out of St. Louis.
Didn't we do a tour show in St. Louis and like the theater had a hole in the wall and Wade was like freezing to death?
I don't remember that. That sounds awesome. Not for the Wade.
But I think it was one of those things that Wade felt uncomfortable changing because he's like, people could just peek in this like covered tarp thing. You missed your opportunity, St. Louis, to kidnap your own Wade.
Yeah, I guess. Darn. All right, Chicago, Illinois initially won the bid to host the 1904 Summer Olympics, but the organizers of the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis would not accept another international event in the same time frame.
What?
See, I'm very confused because why would the people in St. Louis not accept another event in the same time frame, and then they did both?
I think they didn't accept the fact that the Olympics would be somewhere else. They're like, our focus, it needs to be all us.
Look, it's probably for the best because the 1904 Olympics probably should never have occurred.
At least not in the way that it did.
Not in the way that it did. And who knows why, but it was a culmination of various things. You know, you had unsporting athletes, you had biased judges, you had toxic water.
But the U.S. dominated.
They sure did because of all the different countries that were part of the 1904 Olympics. Let me just see. There's a list. We got United States with 526 athletes, Italy with 1. Norway with 2, France with 1, Australia with 3, Austria with 2, Cuba 3, oddly enough, Germany 22, Great Britain 3, Greece 14, given that they are the founders of it. I think they decided to show up. South Africa 8, Switzerland 2, and Canada 56. So many athletes from Canada, probably because it's really close.
So there were more people from Germany than Great Britain or Greece.
Yes. The Germans really wanted to show up. They were, scouting for their eventual destinations. So again, 526 United States athletes participated in this event.
No wonder they dominated.
You want to know the results just to spoil it because it's not the main point of the Olympics?
Sure.
In third place for number of gold medals and overall medals, with 4 gold and 6 total medals, Canada.
And they had the second most athletes.
Second place with 4 golds and 15 overall medals, Germany.
Yeah!
And then in first place with 76 golds and 231 medals overall.
I wonder who it is.
Whoa.
They're the only ones with the amount of athletes for
Switzerland.
That one guy.
The 2 guys.
2 guys.
Yeah, good. Or Italy, whichever one. Switzerland won 1 gold and 2 bronze. So those 2 athletes did actually participate pretty well. Greece, with their 14 athletes, they got 1 gold and 1 bronze.
Okay.
But funnily enough, the 1904 Olympics was also the first Olympics that introduced the concept of gold, silver, and bronze medals.
Wait, really?
I'm telling you, 1904 was a historic Olympic. Yeah. It was also terrible.
It was terrible,
it was absolutely terrible in so many ways.
It's literally, I believe every time I've looked up, because I knew we were going to do this episode, and every time we've mentioned it before, it's listed as the Disastrous 1904 Olympics.
It's disastrous and historic. It also was the longest running ever. It was supposed to last a couple weeks, like most Olympics do. Stretched for 5 months. 5 months. World's Fair was long gone.
Did the countries have to pay for their own hotels for their athletes?
I don't know if they survived. Like we have no recollection of
how many died in the 1904.
Actually, it's I think it's a disputed thing of people that died during, let's see, deaths in the 1904 Olympics. Oh no, that would be spoiling. Okay, we can't get into the number of deaths just yet.
Okay.
Hold on to that. We're gonna circle back to it. All right. There was a ton of confusion about what was and was not an official event because there was the World's Fair going on, and then there were the Olympics. One ticket does not cover both.
Oh,
weirdly enough,
they combine the events, but you gotta pay for two tickets.
Well, you got to think about it because the Olympics, even back then, they weren't exactly building venues for making things back then. Now they are today. They will build new venues or they will have established venues. But in 1904, there wasn't a ton of sports going on an international level or a interstate level.
Right.
There was baseball. There wasn't football yet. A lot of any other clubs wasn't going on. Basketball wasn't popular at this point. It was really just baseball. But they had 5 venues, right? There were 5 venues strewn across the city in terms of St. Louis. Some were grouped together. I believe 3 were over in the northwestern quadrant of the city, and then one was like dead center, and the other one was southeast, right? So it's like dunk, 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 dunk. There wasn't exactly the best way to get around to get these places.
That's before a lot of major highways and
Yeah. So if you were going anywhere, there wasn't a robust cab system. You didn't have Uber. You couldn't really rely on public transit, and they didn't exactly build it up for this event.
You walked, or you rode your horses.
Exactly. You walked, or yes, because if you think about it, the Ford Model T was not invented yet in 1900. Actually, when was Ford Model T? In 1908. So it was 4 years from the first mass-produced automobile from even existing. So yes, horse and buggies, hoop everywhere, walking to where you go, and no GPS. Athletes got lost all the time because they didn't know where they're going, especially the international ones. They didn't know what their venue they were showing up in. There was cross-information of being like, oh, you're going to participate in this event. Oh, you got to be in that stadium. When in reality,
language barriers
exactly.
on top of that.
And majority of the athletes were American, but how many of them do you think spoke another language or were willing to help out another athlete?
Or purposefully sabotage.
Exactly, yeah. So that was rampant. The city was working against it, the infrastructure was working against it, and the World's Fair was occurring in other venues in the city that people were crossing over each other to go to. It was just not clear in any way, shape, or form. This is building up because there's a certain event that requires a lot of distance.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
And when you have confusion in where even getting to your right venue, when you have an event that needs to cross, 20-something miles, let's just throw a number out there. You don't really have a straight line to that. You kind of got a serpentine around a few different places. But again, getting ahead. The 1904 Olympics was only the 3rd modern Olympic Games. It was the first to be held in the U.S., but in the time since the ancient Greece of when the Olympics were occurring to the 1904 Olympics, 2 other Olympics had been held. Not as disastrous, not as well known. Even fewer participants, even fewer people there, but it was gaining traction as an international thing. There was a lot of people that wanted the money for it. The United States wanted people traveling in and out. They wanted to have this like, all right, it's our chance. We're the U.S. We're going to host this and it's going to be great. That said, 12 countries showed up. But in this day and age, 12 countries means that these athletes had to get on a boat, no other way but a boat, and take a month-long journey to get over to the United States just to participate. And you gotta imagine, like,
that totally explains why there's so few from overseas, whereas a good amount from Canada ended up just coming down.
Absolutely. You could just walk down. You couldn't drive. You better hope there's a train.
You'd horse and buggy that.
Exactly. It kind of blows my mind that just like 120 years ago, people weren't even driving.
Because when I first thought of the 1904 Olympics, I was like, oh, it's the 1900s. So like this existed. And then I'm like, wait, that didn't exist.
Exactly, yeah. It's just so weird to think about. You still horse and buggy in that time. And even for many years after the first cars were invented, there were tons of people out there with their horses and buggies looking at people driving these cars.
There's still people that...
It's a fad. Oh, these cars will never catch on.
There's still people that believe that. It's the Amish. They're horse and buggying everywhere, and they go past the cars.
And I've heard that some Amish people really wish they had a Lambo.
I mean, that's probably true. So. Yeah.
But either way, digressing, 12 countries did show up, but the United States accounted for 523 of the 630 total athletes. 523. Is that how many it was? 526 according to this article, and then 523 according here. Roughly about that. It's hard to keep records.
Well, it's also before cars. So this is before probably The printing press was probably around, but that's still early stages.
You know what the Olympics were before this? Where it was taking place?
One in Europe. This is actually the first time the Olympics are in Paris since I think that point.
Really? Oh,
I
wow.
believe so.
Wow, that's historical. Anyway, Olympics were supposed to be around 2 or 3 weeks, ran for 146 days. It was so disastrous that it nearly ended the Olympics as an event. That's how bad it was. And yet, the Olympics have carried on to this day and carry on flawlessly every year. No hiccups, no detriment.
Yeah, so the Olympics in Paris took place in 1900, 1924, and now in 2024.
Act 1.
First act. What's the title? What do we got?
The disastrous events of the 1904 Olympics. We're going to recount the tales of how it went bad. You know, swimming.
Yeah.
Right?
You swim in water, you go far.
Mm-hmm,
you
absolutely. Go quick. Do you know about the Industrial Revolution?
Oh, God. How many pollutants were in the water?
Well, it's not that there weren't. Okay, all right. It's not so much the Industrial Revolution was a problem, but it's also just like humanity as a civilization in general started to run into problems of scale where they had a bunch of trash and poop and industrial waste products.
Venice, the canals were literally the sewage system.
Yeah, I know, right? And there weren't as many people pooping, so back in the day, it wasn't so bad.
But now there's a lot more people pooping.
There's a lot more people pooping.
And they're a lot more dense in the cities.
And there's a lot more cows. The event took place right next to the agriculture exhibition of the World's Fair.
Oh my God. So they just packed a whole bunch of cattle and stuff there.
So yeah, you have all of the new inventions and developments in the technology of agriculture and farming and livestock.
Which probably included pesticides.
Exactly.
Oh my
and
God.
Fertilizers and all kinds of wonders of technology.
And rain and runoff.
Yep. So the lake didn't have any filters or water purification because at that point, who would even think of that? Why would you even need that? The water had only been sitting there for a few months.
Mm-hmm.
So the event...
How many leeches?
I don't have a solid number on the number of leeches, but the finals race took place on September 6th, 1904. 6 swimmers, 5 American, 1 Hungarian. And if you recall, how many from Hungary? Let me see. 4. So Hungary had people to spare because this guy ain't gonna do so good. Hungary swimmer Zoltan Halme quickly took the lead and kept it until he crossed the finish line. It should have been a clear win, but American judges disagreed because they were far away from the finish line.
Oh no!
For some reason, the judges were not posted at the finish line, but they looking at the finish line, they could see it from where they were, wherever they were, and they swore that Zoltan stopped just shy of the finish line and didn't cross it.
Bias! American bias!
No, of course, because when you're swimming and there's a finish line that everyone can see, you would just stop. If you could see the finish line from like down the distance, why wouldn't you believe that someone would just stop in front of it?
And especially when they're way ahead of everyone else.
Exactly, yeah. So American Scott Leary became the new winner. He crossed it afterwards.
He just kept swimming.
Yeah.
It's like Dory.
And then Scott Leary added fuel to the fire by accusing Zoltan of crossing into his lane. The disagreement quickly turned into a brawl. This was ironic because there were no lanes. There was no lane lines at all.
Yeah, it was just a lake. You got in my way.
Follow this trail of poop around here. You got into my poop.
That was my floater. That floater was in my lane.
Yeah. It was after everyone calmed down, they made the very fair decision that Zoltan and Scott would have a swim off for gold. And after 2 false starts, once again, Zoltan won with the then world record time. Unsurprisingly, newspaper photos of the first race showed that Zoltan was a clear winner and the race-off was completely unnecessary because there was a photographer at the finish line of the race.
Where the judge should have been.
Where the judges should have been, and they took a picture, immediately put it in the newspaper that clearly showed that Zoltan was across the finish line, and the other guy wasn't even in the picture. The other guy wasn't even close. Like, there was no... anyway, whatever. So that was the swimming event in the poop-infested lake.
Did they get sick?
They're all dead.
Well, I mean, it was 1904.
Yeah. So who knows? Honestly, it probably didn't help him at all. Water polo also took place in the same lake. If you don't know about water polo, we did an episode with Tony Azevedo Olympic level water poloist.
The best the U.S. has ever seen.
The event started off strong because a German team withdrew when they learned that the games would be played by American rules instead of international, which was a smart move considering what was about to happen. The teams were determined by athletic club and not countries. So all the athletes left in the event were American somehow. Because why do you even have other athletes from other countries show up if they should have known that they weren't able to compete in the first place? The games were complicated by the fact that the Missouri Athletic Club refused to play the Chicago Athletic Club in the silver medal match, though the New York Athletic Club was the clear winner for gold. So you were asking about people that got sick. Complete coincidence. Within a year, 4 of the water polo players contracted typhoid fever and died.
Yeah, completely unrelated.
It was like less than a year later, like many months later.
Yeah, it just could not possibly have been from that water. It could have been from the people that just traveled on boats.
Yeah, exactly. They come in and bring all their sicknesses. How dare they?
They brought the Foid.
They brought the Foid. Yep, they sure did. Gymnastics actually went fairly smooth. You know, the 1904 Olympics had a gymnast by the name of George Iser. He won 6 medals, 3 golds in the Olympic Games.
Good old Iser.
Yep, he won the gold medal in the parallel bars, long horse vault, and 25-foot people climbing events.
What? Oh, I need to look this up.
A 25-foot people climbing
25-foot people climb event.
This is even more incredible because George Iser only had one leg.
He can climb better. He's lighter.
He has a wooden prosthetic for his other leg due to a train accident when he was a child, but he still trained hard to become an outstanding athlete. And so it seems like he won these events purely on merit because goddamn, that's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Congrats to him. He's probably dead now, but good job, man.
Probably. One can only hope.
Might be Wade. He grew his leg back and became Wade.
Yeah, lost his hair in the trade. For some reason, this is called Act 2.
Okay.
The marathon.
Oh, boy. I've heard stories of this.
The 1904 Olympics was the most chaotic and disastrous Olympic marathon race ever. The marathon began in the oppressive heat of 92 degrees Fahrenheit, which in centigrade, for those listening across the pond, is 33.3 repeating centigrade. So kind of spicy. The track was an unpaved, dusty road that kicked up dust every time runners were running.
That's classic for that time.
Made it difficult to breathe, also a lot of horse poop on the roads. To make it matters worse, the athletes only had one water stop available during the race, and it was just a well near the road. It was 12 miles into the race.
Was it marked?
Well, it's a well. If you don't know what a well looks like,
I wonder, there's probably like water here. Everybody probably ran past it like, I'm dying.
Yeah, I don't even think there was a sign. I think this is, you either got the lake with all the agricultural runoff into it, or you got the well. You're going to pick the well. Yeah, there was also a water tower 6 miles in, no way to drink from it. Just
break it down.
Yeah, the race organizer, James E. Sullivan, was using the event to study what he called purposeful dehydration and how it affected athletes' performance.
Oh, so he was like, they don't need water.
They don't need water.
Now I can study you.
Yeah,
you're my lab rats.
I think the conclusion was that it affected their performance.
Probably. Yeah. Significantly.
It seems like if you don't have water as an athlete or as a person in general, you kind of run sluggishly. The route had 7 hills that were up to 300 feet in height. So you're going up elevation of 300 feet. You're going down an equivalent amount. And then ranging from 300 to plus minus 300 feet, up and down both ways. It was also on a public road that had not been closed.
Oh, so they had to dodge traffic.
Exactly. Like I said, this is a city. This is a city that has all sorts of random things going on. Roads don't have clear lanes at this point. There's a tradition, you ride on one side of the road, and now we have cars. They have really explicit rules. But back then, there's other pedestrians walking in the middle of the street. You've got trolleys. You don't necessarily have to worry about trains too much, unless there's a huge train going by and you have to wait for it to go by. But lots of wagon, plenty of people. This document says cars, but as we know, there were no cars.
There were some. It was not the primary means.
True.
But it was for the
Model
people
T was just the first mass-produced one. There was other cars. At exactly 3:03 on August 30th, 1904, the starting pistol was fired, signaling the start of the race. And the first person to cross the finish line was USA's Fred Lorse, who was disqualified for getting in a car and riding for 11 miles of the race.
He hitchhiked.
Cuba's Felix Carvalhal's resorted to eating rotten apples that caused him so much stomach pain that he took a nap in the middle of the race. You ever just hurt so bad you gotta take a nap?
You ever just collapse and pass out and they call it taking a nap?
Yeah, that. Felix was a 5'1" tall former mailman who walked the length of Cuba in order to show his running skills. He'd worked hard to raise money to travel to the games, but lost it all to gambling in New Orleans. Then had to walk and hitchhike up to the Olympics. Legend says he arrived in his normal clothes without proper running shoes, and a fellow athlete helped him cut his trousers into shorts so he could race. Incredibly, after not being ready for the race, getting sick to his stomach, and falling asleep, he still finished 4th.
Wow. Good job, dude.
This athlete who fell asleep, had stomach pangs, finished 4th out of a total of 32 athletes. The winning time was 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 53 seconds. That was first place.
Which is the longest winning time, like the longest time frame for a gold medal in Olympic history.
It definitely was. And remember, the first guy was disqualified because he got in a car. Another runner was Len Tao, who was attacked by wild dogs and had to run a mile off course to escape them. He finished 9th.
Oh, jeez. He ran a whole mile?
William Garcia succumbed to savage conditions, gulping down so much dust that he suffered a near fatal stomach hemorrhage after only a few miles in and nearly died.
Holy crap.
I don't know why he was swallowing it, but that's what he was doing. The race, after being won by Tom Hicks said that he lost 8 pounds during the race and was hallucinating from dehydration, and the brandy and strychnine his trainers gave him. I have to look up what strychnine
I think
is.
that's a poison.
Oh, most of the things that people were taking in the early 1900s was definitely a poison. Strychnine is a white, odorless, bitter crystalline powder that can be taken by mouth, inhaled, or mixed in a solution and given intravenously. Strychnine is a strong poison. Only a small amount is needed to produce severe effects in people. It does not have any particular use except as a pesticide. So I don't know if his trainers were at the agricultural fair at the World's Fair.
Like, this'll be great.
This'll be great. It's probably good for plants. It'll be great for you.
Yeah, that's poison.
They also used it to kill wolves.
Yeah, that's 1000% just poison.
Yeah, we now know strychnine to be a poison, but back then they used it as a performance-enhancing drug because it helped to strengthen muscle contractions and worked as a stimulant. I don't think it really did that. I think they were probably just having spasms.
Yeah.
Tom was half carried across the finish line by his trainers and passed out after he was told he won, and it took a team of 4 doctors over an hour to get him conscious again. That's the first place winner. He was quoted as saying, once he woke up again, "Never in my life have I run such a tough course. The terrific hills simply tear a man to pieces." The St. Louis Post-Dispatch wrote about his finish, quote, "There was not a semblance of the elastic spring with which he had started. He must have heard the uproar about him, but he betrayed no sign of it. He was past that. He did look up once when the din was at its height. He was within a few yards of the finish. His lower jaw was hanging as imbecility. His eyes stared blankly, but his pitiful expression didn't change." And a race official described that he looked like, as he neared the finish line, quote, "Over the last 2 miles of the road, Hicks was running mechanically, like a well-oiled piece of machinery. His eyes were dull, lusterless, the ashen color of his face and skin had deepened. His arms appeared as weights well tied down. He could scarcely lift his legs. His knees were almost stiff."
So it looked like that, what I was just doing.
Exactly, yeah. If you want to look at the video, you'll see that Tyler was doing an accurate depiction of them. Remember, the guy who was attacked by wild dogs finished 9th place. Only 5 other competitors even finished.
Did the rest of them die?
Well, 14 of the 32 finished, and who knows where the others are.
They're like the ones who did the Tour de France. They just disappeared.
Yeah, it wasn't great. So if anybody knows St. Louis, if you're from St. Louis, this is the route that they ran. It makes very little sense. You go from the stadium, you run 5 laps around the stadium. You then head west onto a road that I don't have the name of. And then you go south on South Road.
Another road.
You turn a right to go west onto Manchester Road, all the way to Ballas Road, which is still a road today. You go up Ballas Road, turn right on whatever that interchange is there, don't have the name of it, turn left on Denny Road, go all the way up to Olive Street Road. Yes, Olive Street Road, turn right, go east, and then you hit North Road, you go south on North Road, and then you take the turn back to the stadium, run another 5 laps, and you're done with the race.
That's already confusing, having to go south on North Road.
Yeah, you first go south on South Road, and then you come all the way back around, you go south on North Road.
Yeah.
That might not be the real names of them, but that's just what this map says.
So I've got some pictures up here from the 1904 marathon.
Mm-hmm.
This is him crossing the finish line.
Listless.
So that's Thomas Hicks. And then we've got a picture of, I think this is obviously before the run, of a number of the athletes. This guy is the one from Cuba. These are the 2 Black athletes, the first to compete in modern Olympics, which was a huge groundbreaking. But this is Hicks, who was rumored to have had his trousers cut to become shorts. And then here's some footage of them running, and you can visibly see the dust.
Yeah, you really can.
There's running there, just good old cornfields.
Yep. Of the other competitors, you have John Lorden, who became violently ill after 10 miles and retired. You have Sam Malore, who had won the 1902 Boston Marathon, was overcome by the dust, despite leading the field at the halfway mark. Malore became disoriented and ultimately dropped out of the race after 14.5 miles. William Garcia, who we talked about, he was found unconscious, severe internal injuries that had been caused by breathing up the clouds of dust. By the race officials' cars, apparently. So there were more cars around than I thought there would be.
I was going to say, in that picture, there were definitely cars. So it was just that they weren't mass produced. So like every car was unique. Because of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of cars were around, but there were probably still a good amount of horse and buggy.
Yeah, what's funny is Lore's the guy who hopped a ride to get back. He actually initially rode the car back 9 miles back, and he waved to people. But the car broke down, so he decided then that he would just see if he could get away with it, and jogged back with the race.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he even had a wreath placed over his head for the, quote, winning. But, you know, he eventually went on to win the Boston Marathon in 1905, so he was a decent runner. I think he just still see if I can get away with it. It was probably one of those situations like, oh, shit. Oh, they think. Oh,
well, and
God.
it also was probably because, there's no water. Screw this.
There's another participant, Albert Corey, who was a French immigrant to the United States, but he didn't have the correct documents, so he's inconsistently listed as participating in a mixed team in the 4-mile team race with 4 undisputed Americans and competing for the United States. The South African entrants, Len Tanyane and Jan Mashiani, finished 9th and 12th.
I believe those were the 2.
They are, yes. This was a disappointment, as many observers were sure Tanyani could have done better if he had not been chased a mile off the course by wild dogs. This is another person. Is this another person that got chased?
So wait, so one of these 2 were the ones chased by the wild dogs?
Oh, it is. The name in the other document was shortened to Len Tao. This is Len Tao Nyani.
So this is complete speculation.
Okay.
But potentially those dogs were trained to go after and find escaped slaves from back in the day, and so they saw them and went after them.
The dogs would not have been in the same era.
Okay, that's fair.
Like the slaves was many
years before then.
Prior, not long in what a history, but a dog that would have been trained. I don't think that's the case.
Okay. But there's still possibility with the level of racism that probably still existed in that time that they might be written as wild dogs, but they might have been released dogs.
It's entirely possible. It's just speculation, though.
It's just speculation.
So that was it.
That was the 1904
Olympics?
Olympics?
The 1904 Olympics, yep.
Starving, dehydrating, stealing cars, stealing beaches, hitchhiking.
They rode. Because there were officials that were riding around. There were spectators that were riding around. You know, there was tons of people around witnessing it, but just in random.
But they drank poison. I also heard that people did get sick from the water that they swam in. I know typhoid was the big one that was mentioned, but I think there were other issues that took place later on. People got rashes and stuff from the pollutants that were in the water. It might not have been mentioned in this particular research, but I imagine there's a significant amount of this that wasn't necessarily covered because it's like, okay, the event's over, and then they stopped paying attention to the athletes. And there were probably other repercussions that took place. It's fascinating because the amount of effort that's gone into cleaning up the river in Paris for the swimming events, for them to be able to compete in that, probably because they're like, oh, we can't have people getting sick from our river like they did in 1904 in the US. The Disastrous. I mean, it makes sense why it's disastrous. I I was surprised at the amount of countries that were represented because the key thing was the lack of airplanes at that time. Like you brought up with the ships, they'd have to take long journeys to get over there and treacherous journeys at that. At time at sea, during that time, it's not that the oceans were more aggressive or there was anything going on with that. It was the level of like sicknesses and illnesses that were taking place that we didn't have the level of modern medicine we have now to prevent. Like, I mean, hay fever back then was deadly. I mean, typhoid is still very deadly, but it's more monitored now. So how easy you can get typhoid from just being on ships because of close proximity to people, and other things like that. So like the risks they took just to get there and then to compete in these conditions at the World Fair where there were just people from all over and so many different things getting in the way, like having to dodge traffic while running a marathon is something else.
It's a fascinating time, and we're lucky that the Olympics are even still happening to this day. And there's always, every year, there's problems with the Olympics that people will always criticize, and for good reason. But hey, we're able to see the peak athletes of the world compete with each other, and that's pretty cool.
It is. And what's more exciting is we're going to get to see it all this year on television via NBC and Peacock.
Wow.
Do you watch the events take place?
Wow.
And a lot of the events that took place in 1904 still exist in the Olympic Games today. Thank you, Mark, for telling me all about the 1904 Olympics. I had some insights as relation to it, but all I did while you were reading was like, I think there are some pictures I could show. Could find them. So thank you so much. Anything else you want to say at the end of this episode?
Nope.
All I know is the Olympic bounty is still an opportunity for you to get $500 from Markiplier's own pocket as he threw it out there. Store.gmfst.com, get the foam finger, and we'll sort all that out and make sure you get paid. But you have to show the proof. You have to point at you on the broadcast with the foam finger and the hat or whatever merch you're wearing, and it needs to be obvious and apparent that it's you and you are on the broadcast at the Olympics. You could be in the crowd outside. You could be at an event. You could give it to an athlete and take a picture with the athlete. You get interviewed. That could be pretty cool too. If you wanted your cues for any reason or want to give us episode suggestions, use the proper flair. Go to reddit.com/r/gmfst and submit those there. We also have the Discord. It's Distractigo. And we'll see you in the next episode. So have a good one. Bye.
Bye.